Shalom Havirai. The reason until this point I have not made a video about my conversion experience is because doing so forces me to discuss, to some extent, a very personal matter that really I can no longer live my life happily and in a way that I am comfortable with myself unless I talk about it. And that matter is the issue of my sexual orientation, which I have for the last 17 years done all that I can to conform it, or rather transform it, into something which is more in harmony with my, what have been my my concept of what should be. In any case, so getting on to the account of my conversion, I would really like to title this video Orthodox Judaism, Homosexuals Not Allowed. Now, when I say that, I don't mean homosexuals as in people who live a homosexual lifestyle in a manner that you can find in pop culture in a way that you imagine in parades through San Francisco. No. What I mean by homosexuals not being welcome into Orthodox Judaism, I'm talking about my experience with rabbinic leadership as a person who, all during that time, made clear to them that my only intention is to live in accordance with Torah, even in accordance with Torah as is widely understood in the ultra-Orthodox community, and that I simply confided in them about this personal matter. Of course, the reaction was far from what is appropriate. So let's begin. First, after already concluding that a life in accordance with the law of Moses is the path that I'm compelled to take by reason of my own personal investigation into the matter, and by reason of my own development of my worldview. So upon reaching that conclusion, I contacted the Chabad of Dallas, Texas. I at this time was already aware that I should be rejected at least 3 times, but I was rejected far more than 3 times over the phone. Never in a straightforward manner, but rather by the words calling back in a few weeks. And that few weeks just continued to be another few weeks. This you can find, well, it's actually the inspiration for what you find in the video that I participated in making, which is titled Reaching Higher. You can also find on YouTube. That prompted me to look into the laws of conversion for myself, because I knew that that was nothing like what I had been told while researching on the internet. After that, I contacted a rabbi in southern Louisiana, all through email. I was located in northern Louisiana, about 20 miles south of the Louisiana-Arkansas border. I told him through the internet and over the phone via numerous conversations that I very much identify with the approach of the Rambam, Maimonides, with regard to the oral law, and that I have great affinity with Yemenite Jews and intend to pray with them upon moving to Israel. And when given the application for formal conversion through the oversight of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, in that form I found a place which required information about possible psychological issues. And with that, I asked the rabbi over the phone, long before actually moving there, whether or not I should include the issue of my sexual orientation in that field, how naive I was. Clearly he had some practical common sense guidance on the matter, at least up to this point, and said, no, you shouldn't write it. He also said that I should not have told him, as well as counseled me that I should never tell anyone else about this. So I accepted his advice, and the plan went on. I transferred to the University of New Orleans, and I learned with him and attended prayers at that location as frequently as I could, which is pretty much at every time that there was such a possibility. Things were going well. After 3 months, he let me know that unless I commit to always living as an Ashkenazi Jew and forever lay aside the idea of praying frequently with Yemenites, that unless I promise such a thing, that the conversion cannot go forward. And this was with the council of the Chicago Rabbinical Council that he had decided this, or that they had decided this. I don't know to what extent his words accurately represented what he was told, but I can just assume that's what he told me. Anyhow, so I had a week to decide what I would do, and my moral compass would not allow me to deceive him, though some people I knew online who had more experience than I properly instructed that I should just lie. After all, lying to your local Orthodox rabbi is not one of the laws of Noah, last I checked. But I didn't lie. And I reached out to an online friend I had known who lived in Pennsylvania. He allowed me to live with his family until I could get on my feet there in Pennsylvania. Much thanks to he and his mother. Once there, I got in touch with the local rabbi of that area and immediately informed him about the issue that was the problem in New Orleans, and told him that I want to formally convert, but that this was an issue, and I want to make sure that this will not be an issue before I commit to staying in the area long term. Thankfully, by divine providence, I managed to get a hold of the contact information of a Yemenite rabbi in New York who I had heard good things about, and met him in person as well, and he was very encouraging and warm towards me. And he agreed to speak with this rabbi in Pennsylvania. He convinced him to oversee my conversion, and that my affinity with the Rambam and Yemenite Jewry should not be an issue, and so it was. Until one day, he calls me aside and sits me down with a very suspicious look on his face and asks me if there's something that I would like to share with him. I didn't know what he was talking about. Never guessed it would be that my rabbi back in southern Louisiana had called him up to tell him about my secret. Of course, as I already mentioned, this very same rabbi had told me not to tell anybody about this secret that I should be so ashamed of. Needless to say, he explained how much of a hindrance this would be at my living as an Orthodox Jew, because I would not be able to go to the mikveh before Shabbat every week. Couldn't possibly be any other alternatives to that, being that it's not even a rabbinic law anywhere mentioned in the Talmud as obligatory upon our people, and being that there are other options for immersing besides just going to the mikveh when everyone else is there. But no, let's keep things simple. Homosexuals cannot be Orthodox Jews. Well, at least they're not welcome. Thankfully, they decided that if I would agree to see a professional Orthodox Jewish psychologist, and he would give his professional opinion that I could live as an Orthodox Jew, and despite my homosexual orientation, that the conversion could go on. And Baruch Hashem, there was a tzaddik in that congregation who volunteered. So every week I would make my way downtown and see this guy, and he wrote the affirmation that there's no reason I should not be able to live as an Orthodox Jew. Keep in mind, all this time I had full intention of reclaiming my innate heterosexuality that had at some point become lost, and was fully committed, as I would continue to be for a decade into the future, to spending what money I had and all the time that I could into therapy for accomplishing this change. Nonetheless, it is as it is. And so the conversion process went on. He had given his approval, and ultimately a date was set at which point, if I would have a plane ticket for that date and show them my passport and a letter of acceptance to one of 2 pre-selected yeshivot in Israel, that they would set a specific date for my conversion, and I would be on my way to Israel to learn, as I had been dreaming of for many years. 2 weeks before the fixed date for my conversion arrives, they, basically the congregational rabbi lets me know that the other 2 members of the Beit Din had decided that this conversion would not go forward. Keep in mind, I had 2 weeks left till the plane ticket would expire. So I asked him, well, how much longer do we have to wait? Until Sukkot? Until, the Festival of Tabernacles? And he let me know that there would be no other date, and that it was a final decision, albeit contrary to his own will. He apologized and basically wished me well, but that there was nothing else he could do. Bear in mind that these other 2 rabbis never even got to know me. Only one of them had I met briefly, with no personal questions, only a few simple halachic questions to see my level of knowledge, which was not a problem. In fact, the very first, maybe second time that I sat down with the congregational rabbi in Pennsylvania, he went through a list of questions and actually stated to me very clearly that I'm already ready to convert, and that was within my first week of having begun attending that synagogue. But nonetheless, due to standardized practices, it would have to wait several months so that it would, fit formal normalities. So my prospect of converting, after having spent 9 months investing in this goal and moving twice, were null. All money that I had saved to this point, of course, was gone. And let me make sure that the camera is still on. Indeed it is. Try to wrap things up here. Okay, so I call up the Yemenite rabbi who I had befriended in New York City, told him about it, and he was very upset about the issue and said he would do all that he could to help me. He also was well aware of my orientation. I never hid it from people, except for that brief period between the rabbi in southern Louisiana and the rabbi somewhere in Pennsylvania. So I let my bosses know what I was doing. They wished me well. I immediately went to New York, not even knowing where I would sleep. Made my way to 770 and spoke with a friend of who had been my roommate in some location in Pennsylvania. And this friend gave me some references to check out. I meandered around New York City, around Manhattan. I found out that none of these were options unless I would be around for several more weeks just to even find out what could possibly be. In the process of meandering through the subways, I came across two Haredi Israelis who barely knew English and didn't know how to get back to where they needed to go. So with my broken Hebrew and the merit of my Israeli roommate at the time, I assisted them in getting them back to their destination. Once we had arrived, and I walked them a bit of ways up the steps out of the subway, I realized that we were just 1 block away from the Yemenite rabbi that I knew. So I went to his home, to his apartment building, and no one answered the bell. I sat there crying to God, possibly for an hour and a half or so, until it started to get a little darker, nearing sunset. And I heard the prayers beginning, afternoon prayers, in a Hasidic shul, synagogue, which was right next door. I go there to pray, and after the prayers are finished, I am swamped by numerous Hasidim speaking Yiddish, all excitedly and with amazement, wondering who is this guy in the flannel shirts and the hiking boots, and probably an apparent southern accent still present at the time. But none of them could speak English except for 2 or 3. One of them only could speak fluently, and I told him my whole story. So this individual set up a meeting between myself and the Rebbe. Of course, he was the translator, and I don't know whether anything was lost in translation or not, but I told them everything. And they let me know that they would take care of me and that I should be able to convert before my deadline, before the airplane. Talk about a miracle, and I'm leaving out many details. This was an amazing, unbelievable situation. So every night they set me up with a new place that I could sleep at. They gave me food. I had whole apartments to myself each night. It's storming. And long story short, so they bring the mohel to examine me to see whether or not I am already circumcised. Of course, they can't just take your word for it. But before doing so, I had to be interviewed as well by the mohel, who himself happened to be able to speak English. And as well as with him, I was completely honest. And when I told him about my orientation, always affirming that I have full intention of continuing to commit to therapy to overcome it, and without any intention of violating Torah due to it, he still refused to continue with aiding in my conversion process. I don't know whether or not he said anything to the Rebbe, the rabbi who was helping me out there, but things were not stopped, and we went forward. For once, my straightforwardness was not getting me in trouble. I don't know how. Thank God. So, he did or did not do whatever it was, and another mohel was brought, a guy in his, I guess, like late 80s even, and he examined me, said, yes, the guy snipped. So I met with a council of local rabbis of that widely known community in New York, all or most of whom would actually be present at the time of my conversion, my actual immersion into the ritual pool of water. They interviewed me why I want to convert. I told them all the reasons, and I was shocked that upon telling them about my desire to join a people who worship the one God alone without partners, and how his oneness was a major component of my being drawn to the Jewish faith, in addition to the fact that the Torah says that all its laws are eternal. I was really shocked at their excitedness, and so they continued to elaborate. Yeah, isn't it wonderful, God's unity, and all is God, and our souls are a part of God? And of course I sat there thinking to myself, oh, I don't know how kosher this conversion is going to be, but I got to get something done, and I'm about to go to Israel. So it went forward, and I made it to Israel. Somehow, in God's hands, I managed to convert with people who only knew me for about a week. And it happens to be one of the most widely recognized Beit Din in the world. They shaved me from head to toe. A practice which used to be common among Ashkenazi Jews. It's mentioned in the Ramah, but no longer really practiced except for this and maybe one other Beit Din in the entire world. I went home to visit my family one last time before moving to Israel. Not one of them said a word about the fact that I look like an alien. Didn't even have eyebrows. And I make my way to the Holy Land. So that is my conversion in a nutshell. Of course, the issue of my sexual orientation followed me against my will. Again, in yeshiva, after just a few weeks of being there, I'm called in by the mashgiach, the overseer of the students. He sits me down, and he too, amazingly, looks at me with a look of suspicion and says, "Have you been hiding something from me?" Yet again, the rabbi from southern Louisiana. So yeah, I told them about everything there as well then, and it was interesting that how, although I had arrived at the yeshiva early enough to begin that period of learning before many other people who had arrived, everyone was assigned a chavruta, a study partner, except for me, and I petitioned multiple times a week, and every time they would say, "Come back. I am not the one in control of lightning and thunder." I don't know if you guys could hear that. Perfect timing. But yeah, so apparently even after my formal conversion, and even though this yeshiva accepted the validity of it, I'm still being treated second class. I want to end this video with the statement that although there are definite problems with the approach of rabbinic leadership with regard to the matter of homosexuality, and we are not talking about homosexual behavior here, we're talking about just regular people who want to live life in accordance with Torah. Although there are definite backward thinking in the minds of many of these leaders, not just with regard to this, but with regard to many social issues, there are untold numbers of warm, caring, religious Jews all over the world who are much more understanding and much more aware of the real world, who much more live out the principles of the wonderful guidance that our God has given us, and who are the true sanctifiers of God's name. And it's ultimately they who will be able to make a change in this matter, because we are the ones who choose our own leaders. We are not under a dictatorship. And the only reason that nothing has been done so far is because converts are afraid to speak up. But no more. Shalom uvracha. Hashem yivarech atkechem. Kol tov, all the best.